Hey guys, it's Drake, and today I'm going to be talking about my collection of books that I have that are in Spanish. So I'd say in the last like 2 to 3 years is really when I've started getting books that are in Spanish, because that's about the time when I really started feeling like I could read in Spanish, to any degree, to any meaningful degree. And today I'm going to be showing the majority of my books. Now, this isn't quite all of them, but I think you'll see I do have enough here to do a good video. So I decided to start with Pedro Paramo, because that was actually the first book I read, like first full book that I read in Spanish. Now, I read it alongside the English translation. This was probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. I really read it kind of before I could have, in a way, because it was definitely difficult for me at the time, and I had to look up a bunch of words, and I really had to rely on the translation. But going back at it now, I feel much more comfortable. And this isn't the edition I read it in. I read it in Spanish the first time, but I was able to find this edition on a used book website. It's from an American library, but this is really similar to what the first edition looked like. This is the 5th edition, as you can see on the front, from the Fondo de Cultura Económica, which I have quite a few books from. But it's kind of nice because it has the original illustrations too. So I'm trying not to spend more than like 1 minute on each book, because I have quite a few books here I'd like to get through. So I'm not going to be saying anything groundbreaking with any of these, but just kind of talk about them, how I got them. So that is the first book I'm going to talk about, Pedro Paramo. All right, and then our second one here is it's actually my most recent one I got out of all these. 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. And this one here, I had read in English. Well, first thing I did, I had listened to the audiobook of it, because when I was in community college about 4 or 5 years ago now, I had to drive 45 minutes to the school and then 45 minutes back every day, 5 days a week. So I had a lot of time to just do whatever. It wasn't a particularly difficult drive. So what I did was I listened to quite a few audiobooks. And if you know anything about 2666, it's a long book and it's a long audiobook. And I listened to the whole audiobook. And then when I went back and read it, I read the first 3 parts. I stopped when I got to the part about the murders, or I think that's what it's called. But so that's where I got to for reading. And then I just got this, so I haven't read it in Spanish yet. But I do kind of have a soft spot, I'd say, for Bolaño, because he's not really my favorite type of writing. But yeah, anyway, I do kind of have a soft spot for him. And this is actually first edition of the Spanish from 2004. And the way you can tell, in case you're interested, is it has to look like this, the copyright page, in this edition. So it's kind of neat. I had to order it from Spain. It took like 2 months to get to me, when it really shouldn't have. Okay, so this one here is my next one. It's called Las Baronesas by Carlos Catania. And this one I was recommended from a friend, Esteban. He had mentioned that this was an interesting book, and that I think he had mentioned that Bolaño was interested in it. But anyway, haven't got a chance to read it yet. I've been prioritizing other stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, look into it. Las Baronesas. All right, and then this one here is one of my favorite Mexican poets, Javier Villarrutia. And this is an anthology collected by Octavio Paz. Now, this one, unfortunately, as you can see, got a little messed up from the water damage from the fire that happened, but I still kept it because it's still mostly okay. But, oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, Villarrutia is one of my favorite poets. And this has some of his prose writing, but then the first whole section is his poetry. His nocturnes, I really like his nocturnes. Gives you a really good feeling for the time. You know, he was one of los contemporáneos, the modernist era. And then also just below this book is another one of los contemporáneos, Gilberto Owen. Now, and this one here, you can see a little bit too. It was also got messed up in the fire, and unfortunately, this one is difficult to replace. I think because it got so popular after Valeria Luiselli put out her book, Faces in the Crowd, or Los Ingrávidos, because it talks about Gilberto Owen in there. So, yeah, this one's pretty much impossible to replace. Really didn't get too messed up apart from the covers, but wait, let me see. I think there's some photos we can see of the guy. Yeah, there you go. All right, so this one. He's another poet. Well, at least I appreciate him for his poetry. And another. So this guy is my favorite Mexican poet, Jose Gorostiza. And he's kind of like, I kind of think of him as like kind of the Mexican T.S. Eliot. That's kind of how I think about him, because you know, his selected poetry is pretty small, and in my opinion, he's the most technically skilled Mexican poet from the modernist era. His first collection is Canciones para cantar en las barcas. And his last is Muerte sin fin. This one also got messed up a little bit, as you can see, but mostly okay. All right, so that is kind of like my first section there. I didn't really organize this stuff too well, but as in like any system. My next one, which I'm pretty pleased with, is a book that I had not read in English. I had it in English. I had the Dalkey Archive translation of this. Larva, Midsummer Night's Babel is what the translation is. But I decided that if I was going to read it, I wanted to read it in Spanish, because this one, if you know anything about it, it highlights the linguistic experimentation of the book. So I figured, what's the point in reading the English translation if, you know, at the time that I bought this, I had been reading some parts of Finnegan's Wake, and I was like, oh, there's no way you could read a translation of Finnegan's Wake. That's hilarious. So, you know, I thought in a similar way, that'd just be hilarious to try to read a translation of this. There's just no way. There's no way. So I'm not going to. But I haven't read this yet. But one kind of nice thing is I did order this from Spain, and this was printed in kind of an interesting printing, kind of similar to how Ulysses was first printed, where there were, you know, 100 really nice copies and so on. Well, this one's signed by Julian Rios. As you can see here, the first 100 prints are at the top, and so on and so on. Mine is number 71, so it's in here. Signed by the author. Firmados por el autor. Yeah, so it's kind of nice. 1983 Barcelona. All right, and then my next one is one that I have talked about for my Patreon as a book recommendation for the translated edition. And I had subsequently given that one as a giveaway on my Patreon because it's so expensive to find in English. And I figured, if I wanted to go back, I'll just read the Spanish. And I got edition El Libro Vacío. And then the one I have not read yet is Los Años Falsos. El Libro Vacío, I had opened that up also to a general viewership on my channel. All right, and then our next one here is kind of interesting. So it is a translation of Gran Sertão Veredas, which is originally in Portuguese from João Guimarães Rosa. But this is translated into Spanish by Angel Crespo. And the reason I have this especially is because Angel Crespo was himself a poet and he translated a lot. But this seems to be the best edition of this book, much better than the English translation that's currently available as far as maintaining the literary experimentation, the puns, the language, and that is the main reason why I got this. Because as you probably know, Portuguese and Spanish are really quite close languages, etymologically and everything. So some of the puns work much better in Spanish than they would in English. So, Gran Sertão Veredas. All right, and then another one here that's quite large, that if you know anything about Andre from the Untranslated, he praises this book highly, and that is the main reason I found out about it, and the reason I got it is because it does seem like a fascinating book. Now, I will plug Andre's review, so if you're curious about the book, if anyone doesn't live in Argentina and you're interested in purchasing it, let me know. I can give you details on how you might be able to get it. Took quite a lot of looking, but I was eventually able to find a guy in Argentina that was able to mail it to me in the US. So, yeah, highly recommended if you can read it in Spanish and you want a crazy book. All right. Then a couple others that are older. Most of these have been contemporary or the last 100 years. Baltasar Gracián, El Criticón. So I've been interested in this one. I first heard about this because it was mentioned by Arthur Schopenhauer, and he had translated part or all of it into German from the Spanish. But it is like a huge allegory. It says here, prolonged allegory, philosophical novel that mixes narration and doctrine, symbols and culture with a language and style that shows the manner of conceptismo, which is similar to Góngora. So heavily elusive, very heightened style, Baroque. It's contemporary with The Anatomy of Melancholy in English. And here's a nice original page, the second part. Isn't that interesting how it used to look? Yeah, I have a facsimile of Don Quixote, so it looks like that. So El Criticón. Another one from the same time that's really interesting, Pedro Calderón de la Barca. And this one is not his most famous. His most famous is La Vida es Sueño, Life is a Dream. But these here are his more allegorical works, El Gran Teatro del Mundo and El Gran Mercado del Mundo. So if you're interested in Spanish Golden Age plays, I'd look into these. And in my head, I kind of combine those two together, El Criticón and this Pedro Calderón de la Barca. This one here I haven't read yet. I haven't even really dipped into it too much, but I was mostly interested in it because it's a Picaro novel. You know, as you can see, La Pícara Justina. But the main character is a woman, which I think is kind of an interesting play on the genre. And as you can see here, it's from 1605, which you might know is when the first part of Don Quixote came out. And this is also known for its, Baroque language in Spanish. It's playful, prose style. But like I said, I haven't read it, and there's really not a whole lot of information. I have been trying to look for Julio Pujol y Alonso, because he did a kind of a study about it, critical edition, but I haven't been able to find that. I've just been able to find this Cathedral Classics, which is the last 3 books I showed. And then I have Daniel Sada's collected stories. Daniel Sada is one of the most interesting Mexican authors, contemporary Mexican authors. He was highly praised by Roberto Bolaño. There are 2 books of his in English, 1 out of 2, and what's the other one called? Almost Never, yeah, Casi Nunca, Almost Never. So if you're interested, those are both put out by Grey Wolf, I think. But if you can read Spanish, he has a very kind of like playful and just fluid style in Spanish. I just love it. Here's another one that Andre led me on to, Pequeña Sinfonia del Nuevo Mundo. And this is a writer from Guatemala. If you want to look at the description there. And I will also link Andre's review on this one. A more contemporary writer from Mexico that I found that seems to be on the rise is Mario Sanchez Carbajal, Muerte Derramada, Death Overflowing. And I just love the design of this book. This is the Premio Nacional de Cuento, Juan José Arreola, which I don't have a good edition of his stuff in Spanish. 2014. Yeah, check this guy out. I think there's on Letras Libres, there's an interview with this guy. He was, he's kind of one of the up and coming guys. I'm certain he's gonna, just become popular and well known, and everyone's gonna have read him. But it seems like he hasn't quite made it yet, so to say. There's a book that just came out that I haven't been able to get a hold of, but it looks fascinating. Bilis Negra. Bilis Negra is, black bile. And it sounds like a fascinating book, but I don't think it's on wide release yet. I think it might only be in a library or EPUB, but anyway, I haven't been able to get my hands on it. All right, here's another one by Daniel Sada. ¿Por qué parece mentira? La verdad nunca se sabe. And I really love this cover here. It's a photo by Manuel Alvarez Bravo, which is he's actually my favorite photographer. And this book has one of the most striking opening lines out of any book these are beautiful. Dios creó el mundo porque ama las historias. Frase escuchada en el Café La Blanca del Centro Histórico de la Ciudad de México. So translation of that, just quick translation, is God created the world because he loves stories. And that was a phrase heard in the Café La Blanca in the historic district in Mexico City. And then the second one, the title, ¿Por qué parece mentira? La verdad nunca se sabe. Because it seems like a lie, the truth will never be known. Quick translation. And then that was a phrase heard in a bus station in Culiacan, Sinaloa. Which I just love that idea that he's just listening and he came up with the title of his book. But then look at this one. Llegaron los cadáveres a las 3 de la tarde. And kind of a translation I thought of for this, because this is like the book I want to translate. If it's not translated by the time I really feel confident about my translating ability, I haven't read this whole book yet. I've been working on it for years, but I just love it. My translation for that first line is, they arrived, the corpses, at 3 in the afternoon. So let me know what you think of that, maybe, if you're into translation, if you think that's valid. So that's one. Another one that I got a heads up from Esteban also is Las Pasiones Alegres by Pablo Fares. Pablo Fares. But anyway, yeah, so this book, haven't read it yet, but it seems like a very well written kind of sci-fi direction book. So it's a dystopian society where this artificial intelligence has total control over people, is able to implant false memories, and just that idea, because not enough books deal with artificial intelligence. I mean, it's going to be such a huge thing, I think, or even just the idea of it is, I think, fascinating, but not enough books deal with it. And I was just really pleased to find that at least one author is trying to deal with it in a justifiable way. All right, and then another one here. Another one that Andre led me on to, La Tejedora de Coronas, Germán Espinosa. He's called Gabo Sin Nobel, so he's the other Colombian writer that has not won a Nobel Prize, but was considered very high quality. And this is a book about a female polymath in the kind of Spanish Golden Age time period. But if you're interested, again, I'll link Andre's review. I just really like that cover too. All right, and then surprise, surprise, another one that Andre led me on to, but I fell in love with the author so much that I just bought everything. I found everything and bought it that he had written. So first things first, this is the book that Andre talked about from the Untranslated. This is Attila by Alyosha Kol. So I'm not going to go over this one too much because Andre did an excellent write-up of it, better than I could do. But this is like the book I was looking for, that I didn't know I was looking for. Alyosha Kol himself is just a fascinating guy. I plan on doing a pretty in-depth video overall of him, and I'll probably be posting that on my Patreon in the next couple months. So if you're interested, go ahead and hop on my Patreon. It would be much appreciated. But yeah, Attila is just a fascinating book. It's written in such an interesting style. So here, I'll just give you like a random page. And if you want to read it. I see there's like and then I'll give you something else that's kind of fascinating. Oh yeah, look at that. Just look at that top paragraph there. All right, well, so I'll just do a little short one on that because I have a couple other of his books. El hilo de seda, a silk thread, a thread of silk with a Chinese ink drawing, or ink painting. And this book, I've only read part of it. His style is definitely above my current level, but I just love it so much that I work really hard to read it. If you're interested in reading what the description is. The way I kind of look at this one is it's kind of like a prose fiction about art, kind of his ruminations and a general essay on art, and just loved it so far. Let me show you the first page. No, that's not the first page. Here. Oops. Primero velada. All right, so there's that if you want to read that first page, see what you think about it. And then another one is his collection of poetry. This is by far the easiest to come by. You can order this really readily. This was printed after he died. So he died in the early 1990s. Maquinarias. And this book is kind of fascinating because he writes poems in, so look at this first one. He writes it like a song. And then this one here, if you want to get an example. This one's a really nice one. La tierra se estrió como el flanco de un tigre. The earth is striped like the back of a tiger. All right, and then this one here. Oh my gosh, if you only knew the difficulty I went through to get a hold of this. But this one here, Vitam Venturi Seculi. You know, just looking at it, it's like, oh my God, because I was wheeling and dealing to try to get a copy of this. For months I had to look for this, but finally I was able to get it. This was printed because Alyosha was friends with Javier Marias. And man, this, given the fact that it's in Spanish too, this is the most difficult book I've ever tried to read. But again, like I said, I'll talk about it more in my video I make specifically on Alyosha himself. All right, just got a few more books. Gonna wrap this up. Terra Nostra by Carlos Fuentes. Now, I've sampled this book in English. Have not read the whole book. It is a long book, as you might know. But I was just, lurking on eBay and found a first edition copy that was for pretty cheap. Joaquin Moritz, first edition. The way you can tell it's a first edition, first of all, by being a hardcover. But then, let's see here. There. Primera edición, noviembre de 1975. So, very lucky with that. I love the art on the front. Look at that. All right, and then just a couple more. So, Fernando del Paso. So this one, again, I've read partially in English, but then I decided to just go ahead and read it in Spanish instead. For this one, I did keep the English translation because I feel like I'm going to have some difficulties with this as far as understanding everything. So I wanted to keep that just as like a backup. But I love the artwork on here too. This is by the author. Another book by him, his debut novel, Jose Trigo. This one I have not read. I know it's about some railway workers, but have not really looked a whole lot into it. I just got it because I loved what I had read of Palinuro de Mexico so much. I do still need to get Noticias del Imperio, News from the Empire in the original Spanish. Don't have that yet. All right, second to last, we have Pedro Casariego Córdoba. This is his collected poetry. This guy was someone I found, how did I find it? It was on Goodreads. I think it was someone who had a favorite of one of my books that I really like, and then I looked at their favorites, and then this was one of them. So he's an interesting Spanish poet. I'll just show you, turn to a random example. One of his poems, if you want to read it, about the battery in New York. And just another one. But yeah, he's interesting. He's kind of a more playful poet. His poetic style kind of reminds me of Roberto Bolaño's poetry, because it's that kind of a lower register, I guess is how I'd put it. Not super obscure or anything, nothing like Aliocha, but it's kind of a nice playful style. And then lastly here we have Bomarzo by Manuel Mujica Lainez, which is he's a writer from Argentina, and this is a book about the Italian Renaissance. But one kind of hilarious story I have about this one is that I found it in Texas, in the middle of a suburb in Texas where I should not have found this book. So I had to buy it. But it's also a fascinating book, and the English translation is really expensive, so I had to get that one. So another fascinating one. All right, well, I know I shared a lot of stuff, and I'll be honest, I haven't read half of these, but I just thought it'd be nice to share, and I just really have such a strong positive feeling for these Spanish books. I love reading in Spanish. I'm so glad that I've put in the effort and actually worked on it. But yeah, so let me know if you've read any of these, if any of these look interesting. If you want to learn more, I can maybe point you in the right direction or tell you. Also, yeah, like I said, if you're trying to look for a copy of one of these books, maybe I can help you there too, because it certainly was not easy for me to find some of these books. So, all right, well, hope you enjoyed. Death is a Gang Boss.